government may face another lawsuit. CARICOM heads of government meeting in Belize, and Minister of Works Alfred Sears addressing that recent price spike from BPL. Good evening, everyone. I'm Tyler Simonet with your JCN News for this Tuesday, March 1st. The government of the Bahamas may be facing another costly lawsuit after the Supreme Court on Tuesday ordered the release of Eric Stubbs, who spent the last 36 years locked away at Sandilands Rehabilitation Center after being convicted of rape in 1984. Arjuno Saunders spoke with Mr. Stubbs' attorney and filed this report.
The Bahamas government may find itself back in court facing what could be a costly lawsuit following the Supreme Court's order of the release of Eric Stubbs on Monday. Stubbs has spent the last 36 years locked away at Sandilands Rehabilitation Center after he was convicted of raping a Lyford Key resident back in 1984, charges which he denies. In 1985, without legal representation, Mr. Stubbs appealed the verdict of guilty of rape, and the court changed the ruling to guilty but mentally ill against the advice of Dr. Michael Neville. Mr. Stubbs was committed to Sandilands, where he was to remain until he received an order of discharge on the pleasure of the Governor General or political leaders. His release never came, even after the 7-year prison sentence was satisfied. Initially, the Supreme Court could not decide on the case, but the Privy Council empowered the Supreme Court to make a determination, and on Monday, the court looked at a number of factors before deciding Mr. Stubbs is indeed fit for release into the society.
The order from the Privy Council required that there be a psychiatric report for consideration and also a social inquiry report. And so based on those two items that were required, and whether he could in fact be released, the judge's ruling today was that based on the report from Dr. Dillett, it was felt that no, he can in fact be released. There was no longer a need for him to be inpatient at Sandilands. The medication that he is on is something that you have other persons who are on similar medication who are diagnosed with similar conditions as schizophrenia and who are walking about. And so that's the issue there with Mr. Stubbs.
Mr. Stubbs maintains his innocence. Add to that, no medical evidence for rape was ever produced. His attorneys suggest it is because the incident took place in Lyford Key and the victim, a resident of that wealthy community, Mr. Stubbs was held for such a long time. Mr. Stubbs was released with a number of conditions.
Well, it was stated orally that he is to continue to take his medication, that he is to attend psychotherapy, which is the same as anyone who is convicted of a criminal matter. You know, it's like always some verbal conditions, even the same as, to say not commit the offense again, whether it's silent or whether it's stated. That's what it is here. With every criminal matter, there are always conditions, there's always advice. And should you not do it, then you know what the consequence is.
Attorney Mrs. Timothy explained the 36 calendar years Mr. Stubbs spent in confinement at Sandilands equates to an unthinkable 54-year prison sentence. We asked her if there are grounds for a lawsuit and if Mr. Stubbs plans to take further legal action.
The Privy Council ruling clearly sets out that there was a constitutional breach. And so if there's a constitutional breach, to detain him unconstitutionally is to detain him unlawfully. And so there is remedy for unlawful detention. And remember now, this is unlawful detention for 36 years, 36 calendar years, again, which is different. Most persons who go to, who have been unlawfully detained at prison. Mr. Stubbs is detained at Sandilands, and this is in solitary confinement.
This is the first time a sentence at Her Majesty's pleasure has been ruled on by the courts. Mrs. Timothy believes there needs to be amendments to the law preventing someone's freedom depending on the pleasure of the Governor General, i.e. politicians. She is also calling for amendments to the Mental Health Act and for the Mental Health Tribunal to be more active in highlighting these types of instances. Arjuno Saunders, JCN News.
CARICOM heads of government and delegates are locked in for a 2-day session for the 33rd Intersessional Meeting of the Caribbean Community or CARICOM heads in Belize. Secretary General Dr. Carla Barnett addressed the delegates this morning during the first in-person meeting in almost 2 years. Here's Laurencia Smith with that report.
The 33rd Intersessional Meeting of the Caribbean Community, or CARICOM, Heads of Government is underway in San Pedro Amarisque, Belize. This session marks the first time the CARICOM government heads have met in person in almost 2 years. CARICOM Secretary General Dr. Carla Barnett candidly told leaders and delegates that despite the ongoing challenges of the pandemic, the Caribbean community has to learn to conduct its affairs in the new normal.
We gathered together around the table rather than virtually for the first time in almost 2 years. The circumstances that occasioned that hiatus are still with us. We are learning to live with it and to conduct our affairs in what can only be described as the new normal. This we have to abide by in coming to grips with repairing the health, social, and economic devastation of the COVID-19 pandemic. Once again, a disaster not of our own making has befallen us.
Dr. Barnett adds that there are still significant obstacles in the path of many Caribbean countries, as a number of citizens are unvaccinated, school-aged children are still not in the classrooms, and businesses are still struggling. However, Dr. Barnett adds that one thing CARICOM has learned in its almost 50 years of existence, that the community is resilient.
The pandemic has forced us to bring forward the future with respect to the widespread use of information and communication technologies. We can no longer delay implementation of the regional digital development strategy, including the roadmap towards a single ICT space. E-government and e-commerce are here for now and will continue. The application of technology is what will underpin all our development efforts.
The Secretary General says that there is no doubt that to drive the development of the Caribbean community, there must be support of international partners of both countries and institutions.
We have to continue the strong advocacy for the use of the Multidimensional Vulnerability Index as the main criteria for accessing concessional financing. We must continue the advocacy for the simplification of procedures to access funds ostensibly designed to assist developing countries. Institutional support for advancing these initiatives in all areas is critical. The CARICOM Secretariat has commenced its restructuring and retooling to allow greater focus and efficiency. Directorates have been re-engineered and greater emphasis has been put on teamwork and cross-sector collaboration.
These sessions are being held under the chairmanship of the Prime Minister of Belize until March 2nd. This is the first session that Prime Minister Philip Davis is attending since coming into office back in September. The delegation include Minister of Foreign Affairs Fred Mitchell, Minister of Grand Bahama Ginger Moxie, and the country's CARICOM Ambassador Leslie Miller Bryce, among other senior government officials. I'm Laurentia Smith for Jcn News.
Despite Bahamas Power and Light recalling a press statement indicating that customers will experience a rise in fuel costs, Works and Utilities Minister Alfred Sears tells reporters this morning that Cabinet hasn't approved anything pertaining to that. We learned this much during his interview ahead of the weekly Cabinet meeting at the office of the Prime Minister.
Well, first of all, let me say that we're all aware that the cost of fuel has been increasing very rapidly, especially given the intervention by Russia into Ukraine. And therefore, all countries throughout the world are looking at the impact of these global events on the global chain of supply with respect to the price of fuel and also the price of oil. Therefore, the Bahamas is no exception. In answer to the question, the Cabinet has not considered increasing the cost or the rate of electricity in the Bahamas.
He adds that the Prime Minister had appointed a Cabinet subcommittee to look at how to address the question of energy on both a short and long-term basis.
The government and this subcommittee has met with a number of entities, both national as well as international, relating to the supply of LNG solar energy, the development of microgrids within the entire Bahamas, not only with respect to New Providence, but all of our various islands, so that we can bring down the cost of electricity, and we can have a more sustainable supply, and also to ensure that there is Bahamian ownership.
Minister Sears says the matter was raised to him by BPL's chairman last week. He says he then had a brief conversation on the matter with the Prime Minister.
The government and this subcommittee has met with a number of entities, both national as well as international, relating to the supply of LNG, solar energy, the development of microgrids within the entire Bahamas, not only with respect to New Providence, but all of our various islands, so that we can bring down the cost of electricity, and we can have a more sustainable supply, and also to ensure that there is Bahamian ownership.
Now, that initial statement explained that BPL customers will experience a rise in fuel costs of 32 cents per kilowatt hour beginning today. The Ministry of Health and Wellness issuing a warning over fake vaccination cards. Health Minister Dr. Michael Darville says the ministry has been made aware that some printing companies and other entities that produce cards have been producing cards that fraudulently attest that the cardholders have been vaccinated in countries abroad. According to the statement, these cards also falsely assert that they have been issued by legitimate authorities in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
There is an ongoing investigation. I don't want to go into the details of the investigation, but we want all print companies who are producing cards, and if they are involved in this kind of activity, to stop immediately, because it was referred to the Royal Bahamas Police Force.
How many cards were you?
I do not know the amount of cards, but we found some irregularities, and we are investigating. I don't think it's a large amount. But what we have to do is we have to nip it in the butt right away, because a lot of people who may be doing it may not realize it's against the law to manipulate a card from a foreign jurisdiction and put the Commonwealth of the Bahamas seal on the card.
Dr. Darville says the public should be aware that the Bahamas has no authorization to issue vaccination cards on behalf of another country, and any entity that produces such a card violates the law. Now, persons found in possession of these cards or persons producing these cards are guilty of an offense relating to the false printing of documents. Mr. Darville says holders of these cards should immediately destroy them. Printing companies or other entities are also ordered to stop producing these cards or risk facing legal consequence. Asked how many countries these fake cards are coming from, the health minister says this.
Well, it was brought to my attention by the vaccination committee, and immediately we moved swiftly to report it to the appropriate authorities. I'd like to leave it like that, because I don't want to speculate what's out there. It may be a very minor thing, or as well as it may be more complicated than we anticipate. But I've spoken to our team, and they're on top of it. It did not affect our database in no particular way. But you know, if you have a card and people do not check, you can go places presenting a card, and if you do not do the necessary barcodes and to verify what the card is, you may be able to slip through the crack in an event where you're supposed to be vaccinated.
It's also unclear how many of these cards were found by the committee. The Russian assault on Ukraine now into its 6th day, with a deadly attack on Russia on a TV tower in Kyiv, hitting nearby broadcast facilities, according to Ukrainian officials. And while the situation is happening thousands of miles away from here at home, reports circulated on social media suggest that Russian President Vladimir Putin plans an attack on the Bahamas. Well, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, in a statement, says these reports from the public have come to the ministry's attention with reference to a video circulating on social media, which alleges to present Russian President Vladimir Putin issuing threats against the Bahamas. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs wishes to inform the public that this is a fake report in which the context of the video was maliciously edited to mislead the viewer. There are absolutely no threats against the Bahamas from Russia, and any claims of such are false. National Security Minister Wayne Munro also weighing in.
I don't have a clue what one would want to target in the Bahamas. You reach the point where mischievous people have nothing better to do than to sit down and create these things. There are no U.S. nuclear weapons here as far as we're aware. If there are going to be nuclear strikes, one would wonder why somebody would target the Bahamas, and persons just need to stop getting up to mischief.
The Ministry of Foreign Affairs in its statement further asking the public to refrain from circulating such content and to immediately report the same to the police. You're watching JCN News. Stay with us.